Okay, we'll now call to order the Wednesday, September 7th, 2022 Reno City Planning Commission meeting. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Draculich, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Michelle, can we get a roll call, please?
J.D. Draculich.
Here.
Peter Gower is absent. Mark Johnson.
Here.
Arthur Munoz.
Here.
Kathleen Taylor is absent. Sylvia Villanueva.
Here.
Alex Felto.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll now move to agenda item number 3, which is public comments. Are there any requests to speak forms on general public comments?
Let me read my little thing here. It should be noted for those in the audience that comments are to be addressed to the Planning Commission as a whole. Comments heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Planning Commission agenda. Please note that the Planning Commission may not take action upon any matter not agendized for possible action on today's agenda. When you are called on for public comment, please state your name for the record and begin speaking. The timer will begin when you say your name, and you will be afforded 3 minutes. If you are an attendee in the Zoom meeting and would like to make public comment at this time, please raise your hand. Lastly, while in this room, please be respectful. Warnings will be issued by the presiding officer if there is disruptive behavior, and you will be asked to leave chambers if the behavior continues. With that, we did not receive any request to speak forms. Oh, we do have one person in Zoom. We'll go ahead and move. We'll move Penny over so she can speak on this item. Penny, can you hear us? While we're waiting for Penny, we do have a voicemail that will play after this, after public comment is made.
Great, thank you.
And there was correspondence received, just general in nature, that was forwarded to the Planning Commission. There was one for a future agenda item that hasn't been agendized yet either, and those were forwarded to the Planning Commission as well. Penny, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me? This is not Penny. This is her husband, Art. Can you hear me?
Hi, Art. Could you state your name for the record and then begin
Yes,
speaking?
Art
You have
Rangel.
3 minutes.
Yeah, Art rang. I'm having internet issues. That's why I'm logged in under her. I just wanted to remind the commission of the NRS 278.0284, which is the consistency requirement for master plans as they provide to consistency between the master plan and local ordinances. In my opinion, the land use code as written today is not consistent with the goals and policies of the master plan, and is in that it treats high density residential uses in different zoning districts differently. This speaks to the issue of residential consistency. That's also part of Title 18. What's happened is, in my opinion, having written these master plans and zoning ordinances, is there's a carryover about how land uses are dealt with, especially in the downtown mixed use district. The zoning code speaks to zoning districts, not to uses. Let me give you an example. I'm in the Montage. The Montage, out of the 380 units in that building, 376 of those units are residential use, with only 4 being commercial. So there's really no difference in the land use component between the Montage, Arlington Towers, Riverwalk as a residential zone within the city. As I go through the proposed changes in the master plan, it still talks about zoning districts, not about land uses. So that's something I would request the council or the commission look at to consider actually requiring a conditional use permit for these kind of uses. And as you know, Section 1808605 conditional use permit procedure provides a mechanism for the city to evaluate proposed land uses that have a unique or widely varying operational characteristics or unusual features. This procedure is intended to ensure compatibility with surrounding areas that may be mitigated as provided for anticipated impacts. So what I'd like to, me and other people in downtown would like to see is a conditional use permit requirement for entertainment uses when they're in proximity to residential uses, not just residential zones. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Would anyone in the public like to speak during public comment? Commissioner Villanueva, would you like to speak during public comment?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, Chairman, if we may have a moment of silence for the reporter Jeff German. As you know, he recently passed, and he was a member of the press corps, so I think it's appropriate.
Thank you, Commissioner Villanueva, for raising that issue. Seeing no more public comment, we'll close public comment. Our agenda allows us to take items out of,
Wait, no, we have a voicemail, I'm sorry.
oh, my apologies.
Hello, this is Brandon Kearney, and I'm calling in reference to some hilltop estates being put in Lemon Valley. We should not be able to see the top of the hill chopped off and leveled for housing. It should be bare. Thank you. If you have any questions, you can call me back at 775-462-0020. And again, this is Brandon Kearney. Thank you.
That's it for public comment.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, seeing no more public comment, we'll close agenda item number 3, which is public comment. On to agenda item number 4. I would entertain a motion to continue this training to a date in the future when we have the newest member of our planning commission on the board. Would anyone like to make a motion to continue the agenda item? Possibly Commissioner Johnson, whose great idea this was.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think in light of the changes that we're going to be seeing and the fact that we have been working through the training session, I guess I would recommend with staff's acceptance, of course, since they were the ones that added the schedule, that we table or postpone the presentation, the APA planning presentation for this evening to a date in the future. And I would say not a date certain, just a date that works with the calendar. So I'm looking to Mr. Gilbert there to make sure that that's acceptable.
Nathan Gilbert, Senior Planner. We'd be happy to reschedule that training session for a future date.
Okay, so based on that, I would move that we reschedule it for a future date.
Commissioner Draculich, I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is public hearings. Agenda item 5.1. Hey, Joey.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Mr. Gilbert, Joey Winter, Associate Planner for the record. Regarding item 5.1, the applicant for LDC 23-1 has requested that this item be continued to a future date. Because this request came in within 24 hours of the hearing, the Planning Commission shall open the public hearing and a vote is needed with affirmative action to move that item to a later date. Thank you.
Before the Planning Commission considers a motion to continue this item, we should open public comment.
We should open public comment. But I do want to state, if you didn't read your emails, that they requested a date certain for the second meeting in October at 6 p.m., and I'll get that date for you in just a minute.
Thank you, Michelle. With that, we'll open up public comments. Do we have any?
If I could interject, we would prefer, in the applicant, Joey had spoken with the applicant, and we'll be renoticing that for a future date, with that date as a target, but no longer date certain.
Thank you. So opening up public comment, Michelle, do we have any requests to speak forms or voicemails?
There is a request to speak form in front of you. I don't know if he wishes to speak on this item at this moment or save his public comment until the future meeting. And no correspondence was received and no voicemails.
Great. Mr. Mueller, would you like to speak today?
Can I do it from right here?
We'd ask that you come up to the microphone just so we can record it and have it on the available to those watching.
I'm Jim Mueller, James Mueller, and very new to this process. I live at 240 Western. I appreciate the opportunity to comment. Thank you. I don't know that much about what's being proposed. I was hoping to hear, what was planned. I guess my concern is, changing a master plan, or probably going to get the terminology wrong here, the usage. Just the words seemed a little concerning, so I wanted to learn what was going on and, maybe weigh in on that. But putting it off, that'll give me a chance to do the homework I probably should have already done. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to comment and for the process. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller, and you'll receive we'll repost this or renotice the agenda item in the future, and we appreciate you coming out. For the record, Mr. Mueller's comments were undecided regarding favor or opposition, hoping presentation will clarify, and I can respond accordingly. Would anyone else in the public like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we will close public comments, and I'll entertain a motion to continue this item to a date not certain, but with a goal of
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Johnson, if there's no further discussion, I'm happy to make a motion to continue case number LDC 23-00001, the Panther Valley Flex Park Master Plan and Zoning Map Amendments, to continue that to a future date to be re-agendized and re-noticed to the public.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Is there a second?
Commissioner Villanueva, I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We'll move to agenda item 5.2, which is case number TXT 23-0001.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I meant to jump in right before that as a comment. I would ask that maybe Mr. Winter have a conversation with the person about the comment. So thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. Sorry for jumping out of turn. I just didn't get it in
Thanks,
there with
Joey.
the discussion.
Okay. Great. Angela?
Great. Good evening. For the record, Angela Foose, Assistant Director of Development Services. Before you tonight is a text amendment. This is actually going to be the first in a series of text amendments that we're going to be seeing over the next couple of years. Just as a recap, we did adopt a new zoning code a little over 18 months ago. That was in January of 2021. And if some of you that were on the commission at that time will recall, one of the discussions we had was that we knew we'd be coming back to do some code cleanups. We anticipated it to be about 6 months after adoption of the new code. So once we adopted the code, we started keeping a list of all of the different areas that maybe needed some help. And what we've realized is there's more than a few items of the code that need to be updated. We started with, 10 items, and then 20 items, and then 50 items, and then 100 items, and 200, and 300. So the list is very long. Some of these are simple, things just grammatical or punctuations, but some of them are much more complex. We have some areas that there's inconsistencies in the code where the code may say give direction or one standard here in one section and then give a conflicting direction or standard in another section. So this is going to be a much bigger, longer, more robust process than we initially anticipated. But before us tonight is 4 big topics. And again, we have over 300 items coming before you. We're going to take these 4 to kind of deal with first. So what I'd like to do is take each of these items, I'll tell you what the changes are, and then we'll have some discussion and any kind of unofficial recommendation. At the very end of all 4, then you can officially make your recommendation to move it on to City Council. But I wanted to make sure we had time with each individual topic to make sure I get your comments as we talk about each one specifically. So to kick it off, the first item is related to cannabis. Under our old zoning code, we had a requirement for related to the retail dispensaries. And the requirement was they had to be at least 2,500 feet apart from each other. That was not something per state law. It was not something that other cities did. It was specific to Reno. And our council put that requirement in the code because they didn't want to have a cluster of retail cannabis. When the new code was adopted, that requirement got removed. Big picture, we thought, well, I don't know that it really makes a difference. The set number of retail dispensaries has been issued. They're all located somewhere. It wasn't something that was of an immediate fix that had to be done right away. However, the city of Reno has been given 2 new dispensaries. So we have 2 new ones out there that are coming forth. So we did feel that timing-wise, it was important to get this one back in code, just so that those new dispensaries, again, aren't clustered next to some of the existing dispensaries. So that's one item that we're looking at. The second item is related to a new requirement that was not in the old code, but was added to the new code. Under our new code, we have these gaming overlay districts. We didn't have that same definition before. And this is basically areas where you can have non-restricted gaming. So if another casino, like a Peppermill or a Legends, the new casino at Legends, was to come to Reno, there's only certain areas where they can go, and it's within those gaming overlay boundaries. Under our new zoning code, we also have a spacing requirement for cannabis, and that is related to all types of cannabis, not just retail. So the requirement that's in code today really conflicts with what was in the old code and makes it much more difficult to actually locate any of our cannabis, whether it's a dispensary or a production facility or a testing facility or a cultivation facility. So what we're recommending is to remove that 1,500-foot requirement so that it's more consistent, again, with what was previously allowed. Now, there's a new state law requirement, and that is staying here, that if you have an established gaming facility, such as a Peppermill or an Atlantis, that's an established gaming facility, you cannot have a cannabis establishment within 1,500 feet. That will still remain, that state law, that's also in code, so this does not affect that requirement. It's just the requirement related to our gaming overlay boundary. So again, let's just take a few minutes, questions, comments, discussion on this particular topic. Great.
Questions right now. Thank you.
It'll be a quick night. Okay, if everyone's comfortable then, we will move on to the next topic, packaged alcohol. Last January, our city council approved a new packaged alcohol ordinance. Now this came before the Planning Commission as Title 18. We also had changes to our Title 5, which is related to our business license. And so those 2 went before council and it was approved. Now that we've been working with this new packaged alcohol ordinance for the last 8 or 9 months, we have found, again, some discrepancies in how to interpret the code and some discrepancies between Title 5 and Title 18. So what these changes are is really just making it easier to interpret, easier to understand, and better kind of define where packaged alcohol is allowed in terms of an accessory use. So big picture, when we talk about packaged alcohol, if you go to a store and you buy beer or wine or any kind of alcohol and you leave with it, that's considered packaged alcohol. So there's certain areas where you can do that, such as a grocery store, and that's allowed. You know, if it's a store that's more than 20,000 square feet in size, like a Raley's or a Safeway, it's allowed. You don't have to go through any special conditional use permits or any kind of special approval from a zoning perspective. Where we run into more of a zoning restriction is uses like convenience stores or your smaller retail stores. We also have bars and restaurants and breweries where our zoning code says one thing and the Title V says another. So we're going to clean some of those up. So let's kind of go through the issues and then how we've addressed it in terms of the solutions. So the first one is just in terms of wording. For instance, in the code today, it says you can have packaged alcohol if it's accessory to a bar. Great. It does not say you can have packaged alcohol if it's accessory to a brewery. Now, a brewery, by default, is a bar, but the way that the zoning code defines a bar is very different. A bar has one definition, and a brewery has a separate definition. So again, from a zoning perspective, that made it difficult to say breweries, you can't have packaged alcohol unless you go through a conditional use permit. Bars, you're allowed by right. Simple things like that, we're trying to clarify. So how we're addressing that, again, is just making it more clear of specifically what types of uses are allowed to have packaged alcohol as an accessory. Next up is expanding the zoning districts where accessory packaged alcohol is allowed. So within our table of uses, we list where you can have alcohol when it's associated with another use, like, again, a bar or a restaurant. And based on what zoning district it's in, dictates whether or not you can have it. But what we found was there's a lot of zoning districts that allow things like general retail and convenience stores and bars and restaurants that we said you cannot have packaged alcohol. And we thought, well, there's a conflict because you can have a convenience store or a bar in a lot of zoning districts. We should be able to have packaged alcohol accessory to those uses. So we went back to the use table and we just clarified, everywhere that we saw that you can have things like convenience stores and retail, we said, let's allow accessory packaged alcohol in those zoning districts, just to, again, kind of clean that difference up, that discrepancy up. Next one was, we identified in the new code that a food processing facility is allowed to have accessory packaged alcohol. But we don't specifically define what a food processing facility is as a standalone definition. So we just said, let's expand on that. So what we meant was anything that has like a restaurant, right? You have food, commercial kitchen, again, it's food, bakeries, bars, breweries, all of those then we took out and said, let's not just lump them into food processing facility, let's specifically identify them as where we can allow packaged alcohol accessory to those types of uses. And then separate from that, we also identify in the code where we want to have fresh food. We heard today, one of the challenges we have is that Reno is a food desert. We don't have all areas of town where you can walk somewhere or drive somewhere quickly and buy food. And so one of the purposes of this packaged alcohol ordinance was to say, well, let's require fresh or frozen perishable food, not just Twinkies and hard-boiled eggs, but actual food where people can go and buy dinner or buy something they can go home and cook. But what we also realized is that certain types of uses already inherently have food, like a restaurant. We don't want to add an additional requirement that you have to provide like a separate, 5 aisles in your restaurant of food that you can take home. That seemed to be really in conflict with some of these uses. So we helped to kind of identify, well, where do you have to have that separate fresh food category? It's things like general retail, again, convenience stores, even hotels, especially in the downtown area. We do have quite a few hotels that have a separate kind of retail component. And so we said with those types of hotel uses, when you have a retail component, you should be providing fresh food if you're providing alcohol as well. So we just identified those more specifically, where those are at and which ones have to provide fresh food as opposed to uses that shouldn't have to provide a separate shelving of fresh food for people to buy. And then the next one is requirements for a conditional use permit versus a minor conditional use permit. So a conditional use permit is what comes before Planning Commission. It's a 3-month process. You pay a couple $1,000s. The applicant goes through, the public hearing, we add conditions of approval. The minor conditional use permit is a 30-day review process. Staff reviews it, writes a staff report, adds conditions of approval, and we also notify the public. So we do send out public notice cards for minor conditional use permits. What we're seeing is that when these types of uses, again, packaged alcohol and accessory, come forward, we're adding pretty much the same conditions. We look back at the Safescape regulations, and we pretty much copy and paste those and say, here's the conditions you have to add. So we said, it's not really special anymore, right? We used to call them special use permits, now we call them conditional use permits. Is there something unique or special about these applications that warrants going to Planning Commission and 3 months worth of time, or can we capture all of that and get those same conditions through a minor conditional use permit? So what we're proposing is to modify on these accessory uses with packaged alcohol, change it from a conditional use permit to a minor conditional use permit. Again, there's still a public notice component because we send out the public notices. If there's concerns from the neighbors about a particular use, we still have the ability to add different conditions through that minor conditional use permit process. And then finally, or almost finally, on the discretionary review, we found that our code had different regulations for what triggers a discretionary review. So again, things like bars versus microbreweries, we define those differently. So we expanded the uses and said bars would trigger a conditional use permit or a minor conditional use permit under certain circumstances. And then we identified microbreweries as a separate set, a different type of use. Just more of a cleanup stuff that you guys wouldn't even notice, but trying to interpret what the code meant versus what our definitions say. We tried to just clean that up. And then we also have a definition for packaged alcohol that's accessory to a primary use, but it left out kind of a key component of, if you have a primary use, like a hotel, accessory to that is retail. Accessory to that is the packaged alcohol that's accessory. So it's almost like 3 layers of a use. So we cleaned up the definitions that would cover places like a hotel when you're looking at a smaller retail component. We don't penalize you for having, a 5-story hotel and saying a certain percentage of that hotel square footage has to be perishable foods. What we said is the retail component has to have a certain percentage of perishable or non-perishable foods. So again, just something that we found as we're working through actual applications coming in of the code just needed to be cleaned up and better defined what some of these uses were. So that's a lot to go over. Big picture, things you like, don't like, questions.
Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Angela, I'm hoping I know the answer to this, but I just want to get it clarified. So I'm looking at, I guess, the second bullet on there. So essentially expanding where it's allowed, and I didn't see it in here, it doesn't change any of the requirements. So in other words, if there's already, say, a conditional use permit requirement for a bar in a, MF21 zone, then that all still happens. If that bar brings the packaged alcohol sales along with it, it's all just, there's no change into the actual process for, the applications for the primary use.
Correct.
This is just kind of clarifying where it was previously outlawed. There's no reason to outlaw it if it's an accessory to a primary use that already has all of the entitlement requirements for it.
Exactly. As an example, neighborhood commercial. So if you wanted to do a restaurant with alcohol in a neighborhood commercial zoning, that would trigger a conditional use permit. That doesn't change. But with the accessory alcohol, you could not do accessory alcohol in neighborhood commercial. We said, well, that doesn't make sense. If we allow restaurants with alcohol, shouldn't we allow packaged alcohol with those primary uses? So again, your primary use, the conditional use permit triggers stay the same. This is basically just lining up where we allow accessory alcohol with those primary uses.
Okay. And that's the way I read it. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding it because there was a lot of, follow-up to that one comment. So thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alex. Or excuse me, Chair Alex. Hello, good evening. So the code, section 5, is it right?
Title 5.
Title 5. So Title 5 covers licensing, right? Is
Correct.
that- okay, and Title 18 covers development. That's the development code. So with regard to the conditional use versus the minor conditional use, the biggest difference I notice is the difference between having a public hearing and not having a public hearing. With regard to a license, I understand that goes in front of City Council. City Council determines if it's appropriate to issue a license or not issue a license. But with regard to land use, that's the difference between a matter of entitlement and a matter of not having an entitlement. So, right, am I understanding it correctly?
Kind of. We do consider minor conditional use permits also entitlements. So whether it goes to a public hearing or it's just a staff review, it is entitled with the land. You still have the same timeframes you have to meet. That minor conditional use permit can also be appealed, and it would go straight to City Council on appeal. So from an entitlement or discretionary kind of topic, we consider both of them entitlements and discretionary reviews.
Okay, so it creates an entitlement, but one has a hearing and the other does not have a hearing.
Correct.
So the public can come, if it's a conditional, and I understand that they can appeal to the City Council, but if it's a conditional use, then the public can come and protest at a public hearing for that entitlement, versus if it's a minor conditional use, the public does not have the option.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any just general comments then? Again, what at the end of tonight, you will be recommending that this move forward to council. And so if there are concerns with the way this is written, let me know, and those concerns will also be forwarded to City Council. Or things that you love. Okay.
Chair, may I? So do you recommend that we give you those comments now or hold our comments till the end?
I think while we're on the topic, it would be good to get them now just while it's fresh in everyone's mind, and then we can have or you guys can have a discussion on it as well.
What do you prefer?
Sure. I mean, I love the clarification that makes it clear that breweries and brew pubs are not restricted from having packaged alcohol. That is great. I'm glad that that's in here.
So I think I agree with that. I think it makes sense. The one thing I don't like is I don't like the change from conditional to minor conditional, eliminating the public hearing, because I feel like transparency is a big deal. And if you have packaged liquor going into your neighborhood, I would like the public to be able to comment on that if they want. I mean, if they don't want to comment, they obviously don't have to attend the hearing. But I like the idea of having that transparency and opportunity for public comment, because a lot of times people don't understand that they can appeal and may not go to the planning division to file that appeal. If it's a neighbor and there's a convenience store and packaged liquor is going to be put in there. So I don't like that component. So I think that would be it for me for this section.
Okay, anyone else? All right. The next topic is live entertainment. So this was kind of a new item as part of our new zoning code. Under the old zoning code, when a business wanted to do live entertainment, let's say you're a restaurant and you wanted to have a band come or somebody playing a guitar come, while your patrons are there, you would have to go through a cabaret license. So that's something that goes through the business license department. It doesn't go through a zoning review like a planning commission review. We just call it a cabaret license. What we used to do is staff would look at it and add conditions. And so we'd say, depending on where it was at, is it in the downtown area? Is it adjacent to residentially zoned property? We'd put some limits on it, some restrictions. Maybe we'd say no outdoor live entertainment past 10 p.m. Again, kind of depending on the specific business, we'd add different conditions. So with the new zoning code, we said, well, let's not just kind of pick and choose who's adding those conditions. Let's make it a separate use. So our new zoning code created a whole use category called live entertainment. We broke it into daytime, and live entertainment was basically past 10 p.m. What we have found is that from a staff perspective, we probably went a little too far, and our restrictions are a little more than what was intended. Something as simple like a band, of course, that makes sense. But what happens when you have just somebody playing a guitar, or somebody who is doing karaoke, or you have DJ trivia? A lot of you have probably heard about that one. So all of that was lumped into live entertainment, and it was never the intent to prohibit DJ trivia from going to a bar on a Tuesday and doing trivia, right? We depending on where it was and what the zoning was, we would make them go through a minor conditional use permit, or sometimes even a conditional use permit. So we kind of felt we went a little too far with this requirement. So we said, well, let's try and scale this back. Let's not go back to 0, because 0 was not a good place to be either. But let's maybe put in just some standards. And as long as you can follow those standards, then you can do it by right. If you want to exceed those standards, then you could go through a conditional use permit. Now, one of the other challenges we have is, live entertainment is not equal. And so how do you kind of define it? Again, a heavy metal band on a Tuesday night at 2 a.m. might be a little extreme compared to somebody playing a guitar at a restaurant that's done by 8 p.m. So how do we find that balance between the two? So what we've done is we've added some very specific requirements. Let's just jump ahead to those real quick. These 7 items. And as long as you can meet these, then you're allowed by right. And so this is applicable throughout the whole city. It could be in downtown Reno, or it could be in more of a suburban area, within 200 feet of residentially zoned property. So the first one is if you're doing outdoor live entertainment. We separate outdoor and indoor. If you're doing outdoor live entertainment, you can do it up to 10 p.m. at night. And again, that's 7 days a week. If you're doing indoor entertainment, you can do it up to 11 p.m. at night. The other thing we found with indoors is that if you are indoors, again, we're a little bit more supportive of going later, such as 11 p.m. when businesses often close, like restaurants close. But because we're dealing with generally indoor entertainment would be more of the suburban areas. We don't have a lot of indoor entertainment problems in the downtown area because you're indoors and you're expecting more kind of a bar nightclub scene. But we did want to require that if you're open past 9 p.m. with these activities, that you keep your doors and your windows shut. We have a couple examples of kind of bars and restaurants in more suburban areas that they have bands playing, and they're very, very loud bands. And while it's great, and most of the people go there to listen to the band, some of the neighbors just get tired of listening to music on a Tuesday night at 11 o'clock at night. So this is kind of trying to find that balance between wanting more vibrancy in a city, but finding that balance. So the next one, item number 4, is that, again, in any kind of new business, if you have exits and entrances, they have to be oriented away from residentially zoned property. So we don't want your front door facing residentially zoned property. So all those existing businesses, they're there already. Obviously, we're not going to make them change, but as a new business comes in, these are the things we'd be looking at. Then number 5, any kind of outdoor live entertainment that's within 150 feet of residentially zoned property would have to go through a conditional use permit. So you can be allowed by right if you're more than 150 feet from residentially zoned property. If you're indoor, then you could be next door to residentially zoned property. Number 6 is the next one. This has come up more so in the downtown area. We don't usually have a lot of pedestrian queuing or people standing in line to get in more of our suburban areas, but definitely in the downtown area. We are requiring that if you're going to have any kind of people lining up or stacking up to get into your establishment, your bar, your restaurant, your venue, that you have to submit a queuing plan. We see this a lot through our business license departments, again, especially in the downtown area, where we have crowds of people to get in to see a band, and oftentimes they're just loud and unruly, and they're kind of filtering into the streets and not staying on the sidewalk. So we work with them to do some kind of a queuing plan. So this would be, again, a requirement for any of those bars or restaurants where they're going to have people lining up outside. And then finally, number 7. So all of these would be allowed by right. Doesn't matter if you're in suburban Reno or downtown Reno. If you want to exceed any of these, so let's say you want to have outdoor live entertainment at midnight on a Saturday, you'd have to go through a conditional use permit. That would go to Planning Commission. You guys could review them on a case-by-case basis. So generally speaking, as long as you can meet those 7 requirements, you would be allowed by right. And that's the biggest difference. Kind of going back to this list here. So real quickly, just going through, we took live entertainment out as a primary use, and we said it's really just accessory, right? We don't have really any venues where live entertainment is your primary use. It's all accessory. So we allowed it in all zoning districts, accessory to whatever use you are. And you could be really any kind of bar, any kind of restaurant, anyone that does any kind of live entertainment, accessory to that, as long as they follow those standards, would be allowed by right. Next to that, again, we talked about it. If you want to exceed those regulations, you go through the conditional use permit and the public hearing process. Doesn't matter if you're in downtown Reno or more suburban Reno, same rules applied across the board. We updated just the definition of live entertainment and made it a little bit more specific. So it does include things like singing, dancing, floor shows, musical entertainment. We looked at other zoning codes and just tried to better define how they kind of capture cabaret activities. And those were the terms that we generally heard. So we thought that made more sense. And then just kind of as a small thing, we do have separate uses for outdoor amusement. And so we updated those definitions to exempt not exempt live entertainment. Again, live entertainment would be accessory. So if you have a big rodeo going on, and let's say you do a rodeo every weekend and you have bands every weekend at your outdoor venue, you can do it as long as you follow those rules. If you want to exceed those, go through the conditional use permit process. And then we also currently have a category for daytime entertainment, and it became very kind of convoluted of daytime was any kind of live entertainment between the hours of 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. And then it jumped into live entertainment. So it just got very confusing of daytime versus live. So we said, let's just combine them all into one type of entertainment. And then we added a separate use, which we didn't have in the code before, for event centers. So if you have a place like where you're holding weddings or quinceañeras or just general retirement parties, those kind of events, now we have a separate category in our zoning code for that particular type of use. Questions, discussions?
Commissioner Draculich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that. Notably, I appreciate you guys scaling back on the live entertainment and being a little more detailed. Going back to that previous slide, number 2, on the live entertainment or indoor live entertainment, any reason for 11 p.m.? Is there a reason why it wouldn't be 12 a.m.? Or go ahead and clarify if you'd like.
Yeah, our hours of operation for businesses, generally speaking, you can be open from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And beyond that, you typically have to go through a conditional use permit for hours of operation. So we said most businesses, and again, depending on what zoning district you're in, if you're in the downtown area, you have a lot more flexibility to be open 24 hours a day. But generally speaking, most businesses in the city of Reno have to be closed by 11.
Okay. And I bring that up because I guess the first thought I had was if someone is doing indoor live entertainment, obviously sound's going to come down a bunch. Suburban establishment, it makes a lot of sense. I guess I'm thinking of like a bar in Midtown who maybe has one person on a guitar, entertaining the people there. Doors are closed, it's the winter, and like you said, you've really only got an entrance and an exit opening up to a street. I guess I just wouldn't want to hinder small businesses too much if they are doing indoor and live entertainment. But it looks like is the process pretty simple and quick. If they do want to have, some guy who's going to play on a guitar till 12 o'clock, what does that look like for them?
So in this case, based on these rules, they would have to go through a conditional use permit.
Okay.
And we'd look at the specifics of that bar, what's around it, what they're asking for.
And the efficiency on that is pretty simple. I guess, once again, just small businesses, are usually adaptive and, have great ideas, and they're going to do something in 10 days and they want to achieve their goal of getting that done. And is it something that does move swiftly or something we can do there?
It's from the time you submit till the time it gets to Planning Commission, it's about 2.5 months.
Yeah.
And about, I think, $4,000 to $5,000 worth of application fees. And that's just the fee to the city. You still have to put the application together or hire somebody to put your application together. That is one of the bigger complaints we've gotten from this live entertainment section of code is it is really hindering small business.
And that's my main concern. And I'm no small business owner like that. And they have amazing ideas, and many of them do need to come through the city. And I completely respect that. But a lot of the time, small ideas, that help them spur business for whatever reasons, or they have 100 reasons as to why they would want to move swiftly on idea to spur business. So I guess just as a note, that would be my only concern, is I'd hate to slow them down, especially if we're looking at specifically indoor live entertainment. Makes a lot of sense compared, to separate that from outdoor, because there's a big shift there. So I guess maybe if you guys want to look at that, or, kick the can down the road and maybe address that a little bit more.
And just throwing ideas out, some of these businesses have extended hours of operation, because they already have a conditional use permit for hours of operation, or because they're in certain zoning districts. So for instance, if you're in downtown, you can operate 24 hours a day. If you're adjacent to Virginia Street and you're in the Midtown area, you can operate 24 hours a day by right. You don't have to go through a conditional use permit. If that is something that you guys would like to see, we could craft something to better align with where you're allowed to have expanded hours of operation by right, and allow indoor live entertainment to match those same hours of operation.
That would seem to make a little more sense to me. I guess I don't have the right verbiage for you, but
No, I mean, I get the general idea.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an easy enough one that I can.
Yeah, and
Take to council.
I'm thinking heavily like Midtown, just because there's so many bars and restaurants and kind of unique spots that, are clearly just bars, and you'll never see music in there, and then some that have the ability and flexibility to move in any direction that the business owner wants to go. And, I just don't want them hindered, but you get the gist.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, just following up on that, Angela, because I appreciate where Commissioner Dracula was going and your possible solution to that. I guess the question that I have is, how does, and maybe this is only for an outdoor thing, but I know we've run into this before for like a special event permit. Does that only apply if you're like outdoors or right of way, or is that a vehicle like if somebody was going to have a festival or something for a 3-day long weekend and they wanted to have their entertainment run later, is that a vehicle for that, or do they have to go through the full conditional use permit process?
So we do have the special event permits. You can do up to 6 activities a year. And so I think for the special event you're talking about is, we've got a band coming to town. They're just coming twice this summer. We'd like to have them go till midnight. You could use that special activity permit. That does get routed to the internal city staff. We do add conditions kind of as needed. So that is an option that would still be in play.
Okay, because I like the idea of tying the indoor activities to either an existing entitlement or the allowable zoning hours of operation. So I still think that is in place, but I just wanted to understand from a standpoint of what the other options are. And then I guess in general terms, I definitely like where this is going from a clarification standpoint. I guess in my mind, I'm trying to identify if there's any unintended consequences of even, doing what we're doing here. Like, are we addressing one issue and potentially creating another issue? And I'm maybe running through my head what some of those would be. And I think maybe going back to, you mentioned bars and restaurants and stuff. I guess I'm wondering about, this is applicable for any use, any zoning. So say a multifamily area that has a clubhouse. That clubhouse wants to have, events indoors that are, again, it's multifamily. It has no restaurant. It has no bar. It's just their clubhouse, but they're going to have, an event. Is this applicable to that?
It's a good question. I think on that use, we would look at the main use as being, the primary use is an apartment project. And so if you wanted to have live entertainment within, again, follow these standards and you would be allowed by right.
And I think that was the answer that I was hoping for. So it wasn't just you've got an establishment where we might expect to see that kind of thing, but I'm even thinking about a Labor Day weekend party where somebody sets up outside and wants to have a band playing outside, the neighbors, may or may not have been alerted to it. This would fall under that category, as long as they're, then you're even like in a residential area, and you're going under this as a live entertainment neighborhood
Yeah.
kind of event.
And I think, the question we'd ask is, are they getting a cabaret license, right? Are they getting a license through our business license department? Most of those types of uses, they don't need a cabaret license. They're just doing a one-off. And so most of the time they just do it, and we don't get involved unless we get complaints. If it's anything that involves a cabaret license, really is what we're dealing with. So some kind of a commercial retail activity where, like Ranchera is probably a good example, where they have a lot of bars and restaurants and they have activities, happening where they have bands come. Each of those businesses has their own cabaret license that allows that business to have a band or somebody playing the guitar come and follow, as long as these standards are applicable. But if they don't have that cabaret license, then from a code enforcement perspective, we'd say, hey, here's the rules. You have to have a cabaret license from a business license perspective, and here's the zoning rules to go along with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that addresses maybe some of those one-offs I was thinking about, that I just didn't want us to be doing something for the right reasons with what I believe is the right approach and not have something else. But, again, you could be back in 12 months with the next text amendment to this. So we see how it works. Thank you, Angela.
Yeah,
Thank you,
and
Mr.
I will
Chair.
say, just to add to, we had an intern. I assigned her the job of finding live entertainment standards. Pull across the nation, pull up zoning codes and find live entertainment standards. No luck. There was a lot of standards for nightclubs and activities from nightclubs related to like decibel readings and hours for the nightclub activities, but as a use, a live entertainment use, we really struggled with even finding some best practices to compare us to. So we said more of, okay, what's the problem and what are we trying to solve? Does this solve that problem? For DJ trivia, right? Most of those are indoors. They're done by 11. That would solve that problem. For the heavy metal bands that are in downtown and causing concerns from like the Montage, residents, would this solve that problem? If they wanted to do activities, live entertainment past 11 o'clock, they would have to go through that public hearing process. The existing bars will not because they're grandfathered in, but the new bars coming online, if they want to have activities past 11, they would have to go through that. And it goes back and forth with, from a city perspective, do we want our downtown to be open past 11? But do we still want to protect the residents that are living in downtown? So does this get us closer to that kind of happy medium?
Commissioner Villanueva?
Thank you. So I appreciate all this work, by the way. I used to live in DC in the urban U Street, and there was a bar, and it was really loud until about 3 a.m. every single night. So I think these are reasonable for the most part. But I do have a question regarding 1E. And this is mainly because of the comment we received, the public comment earlier. He made a good point. He said that there's a lot of residential zoned areas that subject, some of these limitations, subject small businesses to some of these limitations, but the residential uses don't. And I think we see a lot of that. And I know I've seen a lot of it with some of the applications that have come through. And I feel like outdoor live entertainment shall not be located within 150 feet of any residentially zoned. What would happen if we said use? Can you explain a little bit about why it's zoned and not used?
Yeah, and this is, for the most part, how our zoning code is written. We have a ton of language that is residential adjacency, but it's based on the zoning. It's not based on the use. Uses change over time. You could have a mixed use. What maybe a business today is an office use, and yesterday was a house. And so just for kind of consistency, and again, more best practices as well, just from a land use zoning perspective, basing it on use gives you at least a little bit more identity to say, this is the zoning. It was, the zoning is residential or it's non-residential. We don't have to look at where the house is or where that person maybe is living. You have a lot of uses, especially in the downtown, where it's residential. I mean, we could probably have residential within 150 feet of almost everywhere, if we said based on a residential use versus residential zoning. One thing too is, as we're looking at providing more uses and a mix of uses and density, we encourage density in these areas. And we don't have the same requirements for mixed use zoning, where you have that mix of uses, than we do for residential. Residential zoning definitely has a lot more strict requirements for what can go next door, and noise ordinances and lighting ordinances compared to a mixed use or non-residential zoning.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to figure out a solution because he makes a valid point. I mean, there's residential use pretty much everywhere, and would be the standard across the board. So I just need to think about that, or maybe if you guys have solutions. I'm not sure about that one, but thank you.
Yeah, and we have a couple examples of these high rises that have commercial on the bottom floor and, many stories of retail above. And what those areas were intended for is commercial, retail, bars, restaurants. If we start limiting where residential uses are, we're going to very much limit what types of uses can go into these mixed-use zoning districts.
Thank you, Angela, for presenting all this. I have a question for you about number 6. So I'm a little concerned that this would apply to a bar that has some sort of person checking IDs, and that because they're checking IDs at the bar door, they're now creating a queue. And I don't want to create a bad behavioral incentive for a bar to stop checking for IDs at the door, because if they do that, they now have to go to the city and get a queuing plan. How is that concerned? How would that be addressed?
So the good news is just administratively, it's not a long process. There's no money involved. It would be part of, they come meet with us. Again, the challenge is after midnight, nothing good happens. And generally people are louder and going into the street, and it becomes dangerous. Cars and people. So what we'd be looking for is, how are we controlling the people? A lot of times we require like some kind of rope gets put up so the people stay within the rope. We also require that if they do have security, that it's helping to keep the noise level down, watch for fights, just kind of that type of activity. It's not intended to kind of push people away. It was intended more for a safety and noise, and really to keep those patrons going into the bar better behaved, and putting more work on the bar owners to actually be doing that. Again, downtown is really the only area where we see this happen. We don't have queuing in most of our other bars, maybe in the Midtown area. But the downtown area, a lot of times code enforcement has to actually go approach them and say, hey, this is a safety issue. You need to give us a queuing plan, and we're going to make you, abide by it.
Is it possible would the city have examples? So like there's a common door on the sidewalk. Would they have examples of, here's what you can do to fix this? As opposed
We do.
To having, okay,
Yep.
great.
And we could work with them. And again, our code enforcement folks deal with this on a regular basis, especially for the bars that tend to have more bands where people are waiting in line to get in, or the nightclub type bars where people are waiting in line to get in.
Mm-hmm. Great. Any other questions on? No? Okay.
Okay. All right, and last but not least, is adult business. This is a very simple one. Under our old zoning code, adult businesses, and this is everything from the strip clubs to adult bookstores to arcades and adult theaters. We have 3 zoning districts where adult businesses are allowed. They're all in the industrial area. So under our old zoning code, it was industrial business, and industrial commercial. Within that as well, we have requirements for locationally where those businesses can be located. So you can't have an adult bookstore within 750 feet of a playground or a school or a preschool. So all of that is existing. Great, that seems easy. The challenge is when we wrote our new zoning code, we got rid of a zoning district called industrial business. That IB zoning went away. It was replaced with mixed employment. So great, those 3 zoning districts is where you're still allowed to have adult businesses, but we did not require the locational criteria in the mixed employment. So this is simply a cleanup to say, if you're zoned mixed employment, you still have to qualify, or you still have to follow that locational criteria that you cannot have an adult business within so many feet of those sensitive uses. It was just an oversight we missed, and so not a whole lot of context there other than, oops, let's fix that. Questions on that one?
Commissioner Munoz.
Yeah, Commissioner Munoz, thank you, Chair. Is this going to negatively affect any of the businesses that are already up and working? Is this
The
gonna make
existing adult
anybody-
businesses?
Yes.
No. So once you're existing and you're approved, you are grandfathered in. Just generally speaking, we have had some new adult businesses come forward with a business license, and that's how we caught it. Because and luckily, again, it was in that new zoning district that was not even around that mixed employment. And luckily, they were not within that 750 feet of those sensitive uses like the playground or the residentially zoned property. But it brought to our attention that we've got to fix this.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
Nothing. Okay. Then that brings us to our last slide, which is a recommended motion. And like I said, I will take your guys' comments and your feedback and include that in the staff report that goes to City Council. The next step is for you guys to make a formal recommendation to Council, and then there'll be a first reading and then a second reading. And depending on what direction Council wants to go, we will then update our new zoning code and start working on the other 340 items.
Thank you. This was very thorough. I appreciate your presentation tonight.
Great.
Do we have a motion?
Wait, Mr. Chair,
Oh,
could we take
public
public comment first, please?
You're right. Thanks so much. So we'll move to open public comment. Mr. Adler?
Hello. Hello, Will Adler for the record, representing Silver State Government Relations. I would like to first and foremost call out Ms. Fuss. She is fabulous. She's an excellent employee, very well organized, and I never felt like I didn't know what was going on. And that is a first for me. So I would say in this zoning change, we did have a lot of complex issues where things fell off and came on, and we didn't have a ton of understanding on the premise of what is a gaming zoning corridor versus what is a gaming property, which it says in the law. And the clarity she provided on this was fabulous, and the work she did was excellent. So that plus adding in the 2,500 foot barrier, reinstating that sort of fell off unknown to us, was everything, and just the additional changes she had to go through tonight was very impressive on top of that. So I want to say thank you again to Ms. Fuss, and that these changes were everything we asked for, and that it really clarified a lot of the inconsistencies we saw with Reno zoning when it came to cannabis. So thank you very much, and thank you for doing this. Have a good night.
I did not receive any more requests to speak forms. There were some correspondence received. Those were forwarded to the Planning Commission and are part of the record. And no voicemails. I already said that, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone in the public like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment. Come back to the commission for questions, comments, or potential motion.
I have a comment.
Oh, please.
Mr. Chair. So generally, I'm fine with most of this, except for what I had suggested to Ms. Foose earlier. And then also, I'm trying to find it, the residential, the 150 foot. I feel like that needs. I don't know how to improve that. The outdoor live entertainment shall not be located within 150 feet. I maybe more than 150 feet. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I don't want to be arbitrary. But I would like to have that looked at further. And I don't know how to include that in a motion, but for the most part, everything else seemed appropriate to me. So that's really it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thanks, Angela, for the presentation, thoroughly and answering the questions and everything. I understand where Commissioner Villanueva is coming from. I know we've had a lot of comments, not just on this, but with any kind of development between residential use and residential zoning. I think this is maybe a situation where, and going with the questions that I was asking Ms. Foos to begin with, was understanding where this was applicable. And I think in getting an idea of where they're expecting these to be based on what we've seen and what has come in, I really think these outdoor events are going to be happening in areas where, at existing uses that probably already have some, noise issues or not issues, but are experiencing that type of use. So it's not like it's a brand new thing. And I think that was where, asking the question, do we still have all of the conditional requirements, the entitlements for bars and restaurants? Those are all still in place. So adding, this activity for allowing that outdoor to happen, hopefully in any case where we would be seeing bars or restaurants where they are potentially problematic, they will have already kind of gone through a lot of this conditional. And I'm not saying that all the way across the board. I mean, there's certain places where they would be entitled by right. But the way I look at this is, if it was, requiring that from an indoor standpoint, I would have a problem. But from an outdoor standpoint, I understand your concern, but I think trying to get rid of that wouldn't be in keeping with the way that we've written other parts of the code. And I do think that there's enough other items in place to make this not be an issue. I mean, I think, again, we're trying to clarify some issues. I think there's other, bigger areas, we've seen them before, where, it's a dedicated outdoor performance space, or it's a patio area that exists for that use. I'm thinking about some in Midtown that have patios that have activities happening well into the night, whether it's live music or not, that has some, volume to it. So the fact that there is a cutoff to this, the fact that there are some other requirements and dealing with uses that, for the most part, will have gone through some level of entitlement or will be in a zone that this is expected. To me, I think this is an appropriate step. And I do, I'm curious to see how it plays out. I think I still have some potential concerns for how, what this opens. But by and large, I think this is addressing the issues that, we see from that, not only the live entertainment, but, the other issue, other items that we've looked at tonight. All of them have potential conflicts from residential and from other uses, and I think this is an appropriate way of dealing it. So I appreciate staff's effort on it. I appreciate the concerns, but I can support it as it's written, because I do think there's other things in place that would allow that to be taken care of. So thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thanks to my other commissioners for the comments on this.
Angela, if I could ask a question of you, is if we were to support the motion tonight, would Commissioner Villanueva's concerns still be presented to council in some capacity?
Yes. Yeah, and I was even I could paraphrase kind of what you said and offer up some suggestions should council choose to do something different with that residential, whether we make that 150-foot bigger or just look at other options to address the residential piece.
May I? Yeah, that sounds good. I just want it to be looked at and see if there's anything we can do to improve it. I do think it is important for the minor conditional use permit that, the public be heard. At the end of the day, it's council's decision. So if you can just present some solutions, I think I can move forward with. I'm pretty content with the rest of this. So I don't want to be a no vote just because of those two issues. And it's council's decision at the end of the day. So I'd be happy with that.
Great, thank you. With that said, is there a motion? Commissioner Draculich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm ready to make a motion in the matter of case number TXT 23-00001, Title 18, Cannabis Package Alcohol, Live Entertainment Adult Business. Based on compliance with the applicable findings, I move to recommend that the City Council approve the text amendment by ordinance.
Great, do we have a second?
Commissioner
Chair,
Munoz,
I'll-
I'll second.
Beat you to it.
He did.
We have first and a second. All those in favor, say
Actually,
aye.
just quick discussion.
Oh,
I think,
apologies.
again, I support the motion, and I do want to make sure that obviously the comments that were raised here and the concerns that were raised here, even though we have a motion approving what was presented to us, I support presenting all of the additional questions and concerns that came up as a part of that to council. So I understand that's what's going to happen, but I'm supportive. Based on that, that makes me even more supportive of the motion.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Angela, for your presentation. We'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Liaison Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a meeting 2 weeks ago. I think the Reno item that was on there was the Ormat Solar Field that came before Regional for review. Some more comments were raised at that, and actually some good discussion from some of our regional associates about it. It was approved at a regional level, but there was some additional good comments that echoed in some point some of the concerns that were brought up here as well. And I think the only other item, and I'm sure staff is aware of this, is that we will need some revisions at the regional level as well as the local level based on our new planning commissioners. So, Nathan, I'm sure you're tracking that, but if you weren't, I know you've got it written down now. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Move on to agenda item number 7, staff announcements. Nathan.
Well, how timely, Commissioner Johnson, just for members of the public. Commissioner Taylor is now Councilmember Taylor representing Ward 5, and there is a vacancy on the Planning Commission until such time that council appoints a new commissioner. There is no Planning Commission meeting at the September 21st meeting. There were no items for the agenda. So our next item will be October 5th, where we have 3 items scheduled: 2 conditional use permits for packaged alcohol, again, timely, and one zone change request, and possibly the item continued tonight.
Okay, we'll move to agenda item number 8, commissioner suggestions for future agenda items.
Chair, can I get a clarification on that real quick, Nate? So there will be, the next meeting is not going to be until October 5th now?
That's correct. The
Okay.
September 21st meeting is canceled.
Gotcha, thank you.
Any suggestions? No suggestions, so we'll open up public comment. Do we have any request to speak forms?
Did not receive any request to speak forms for this item.
I was just going to congratulate Commissioner Taylor on her appointment.
Yeah. Try to convince her to stay and enjoy the meeting, but sadly no. Anyone in the public, would anyone like to speak during public comment? Okay, well, thank you so much for attending. With that, we'll close public comment. Any motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
All right.